Hi, I'm Mary from Average Bards, and this is my review of Fate the Winx Saga.
We are the Winx, we are the Winx, love, join the love. We are the Winx, we are the Winx, we are the Winx. Come join the club. We are the Winx.
I want to go ahead and just kind of like make it known that I'm not the most straight line of thought kind of person. I have ADHD, so it makes it really hard to have cohesive thoughts. So if things are a little over the place in my first review video, I apologize. Fate the Winx Saga is about Bloom, a fairy with fire powers, who enrolls at a magical boarding school in the otherworld called Alfea College. There, she shares a suite with Stella, a light fairy, Aisha, a water fairy, Terra, an earth fairy, and Musa, a mind fairy. With the help of her 4 new friends, Bloom starts to learn more about her past. Meanwhile, ancient creatures called the Bird Ones return to the otherworld and threaten everyone in Alfea. Now, as most people know, Fate the Winx Saga is based off of the early 2000s kids cartoon Winx Club. Many of us, including myself, watched it on 4Kids originally, and then maybe rewatched it when it came over to Netflix. This show does not look like that show. I think one of the biggest things that people noticed right off the bat when we first were exposed to Fate was that it was a much darker take on an old kids show, which for a lot of people was a major red flag, because we think of things like The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, or we think of Riverdale, and we think of how we had these lovely, amazing things as kids that are now supposed to be dark and brooding and grrr all the time, which is fair, but I think it also kind of is okay. Because, in all fairness, originally, Winx Club was supposed to be a kids' cartoon, but with more mature themes. So, in a way, I find this adaptation to be completely okay. One of the biggest things was that, style-wise, it wasn't as bright and colorful as the original show, which obviously plays into the darker aesthetic of it all. But, I mean, in all fairness, fashion-wise, the old costumes and looks of the Winx Club were not going to hit with more modern viewers the way it hit with us when we were kids. You know, the girls' looks and designs were based off of certain icons of the early 2000s and based on the look of fashion designers' sketch art. So not only were the bodies kind of ridiculously proportioned, but the outfits themselves were very stylistic, very bright, very colorful, very in your face, very early 2000s. You know, a jeans skirt hits different now than it did back then. And in all fairness, I don't necessarily mind the change in fashion, the change in that look. Honestly, they color-coded their characters, and that is something that I am an absolute... fucking love that. I love that. One of the best movies of all time that did that is fucking Sky High. Color codes each character. They have like a set type of like colored wardrobe. You know, they beat off that path a little bit in Fate, but for the most part, they stuck to keeping, you know, Bloom with the reds, Musa with like the pinks, Terra with the greens, Aisha with the blues, Stella's with like the yellows and the whites. And I'm here for it. I'm absolutely here for it. Because it seems so little, but everybody has a signature color. So when you kind of fit that into what people wear on a daily basis, I love it when people do. I love it when costume people do that. Set-wise, it was stunning. I actually really loved the building in the school and the outside that they used for the show itself. I believe they filmed in Ireland. I don't know if it was Ireland or Northern Ireland, but it was somewhere in there, and just absolutely stunning scenery. The thing about Fate is that a lot of people are going to go into this show with heavy nostalgia on the brain. And I'll admit, I went into it with that as well. The problem is, you really can't go into adaptations and retellings with that nostalgia brain. You will be disappointed every single time. So I think it's a big point to kind of reel that in and allow yourself to kind of view the media as its own thing. Personally, I think my nostalgia kind of lasted until about halfway through the second episode, and then I was kind of over it. There is definitely a difference between the show we knew as kids and the show that is now on Netflix. The stories are, while there a lot of the story points kind of hit the same beats, there is a lot different about it. The characters themselves are very different. Bloom is not as friendly and not as kind of a person as she was in the original cartoon. Stella is a lot more of a bitch in this version. Like, she's not just like kind of a snooty, spoiled kid. No, she's a full-on bitch in this show. Aisha actually stays fairly close to her character, albeit she's not a princess now, but she still has that very like isolated, socially awkward, not necessarily sure how to be friends with people vibe that she has in the original cartoon, because that's one of the things that her character originally struggled with, was that, you know, going from being alone all the time to having this whole group of friends that she can talk, support, and be with and be around. So I would say Aisha's probably one of the most accurate to the original character. I know that Tara replaces Flora, and I'm not okay with that in the sense that it replaced a Latina actress for Flora, which is something I hope they rectify, as they drop in the first episode that Tara is actually Flora's cousin. So I hope that they will rectify that in some way, but I have no idea what they have planned for that. But I'm honestly not that mad as I could be, because as someone who is plus sized, it is always welcome to see a plus sized person being portrayed in a show in a positive light. I was a little miffed when her story kind of started out like her arc was going to be about her weight and about how she looked, but it quickly grew from that and kind of transformed itself into a like budding, I don't necessarily want to say coming of age, but like growing in confidence. She was very much, her storyline was about, you know, coming out from under her father's like protective wing, like, you know, coming into her own, feeling confident in the decisions she makes and things like that. And I actually ended up really enjoying Tara. Was probably one of my favorite characters in the show, if I'm being completely honest. Musa is not Asian, and that was a thing. I'm not going to talk too much on that because that's not really my place to talk about, but I do acknowledge that is not cool. She's also a mind fairy now and an empath rather than the music fairy she was in the original show, which is kind of meh. I can see why they might have changed it, because it's harder to portray a music fairy than it is like a mind fairy. But she still had a really interesting character arc. Her and Sam's relationship is pretty cute. I don't know who Sam is. I don't know why they brought him in. But Sam was pretty adorable, and they had a nice little relationship about like her kind of coming to terms with her powers and how to feel useful with her powers. And, you know, it's okay to feel emotion. It's okay to experience things. You know, it's not something you should run from. And overall, I still kind of liked her arc. It was very simple, though. Tekna does not exist. Tekna just straight does not exist. I don't know why. I have not seen a single thing saying why she doesn't exist. So I don't know if this is something like a character they're planning to bring on later, or if this is just something they decided to nix altogether. Because they decided to like let the kids keep like phones and Instagram and shit, of all things, but there's no like techno fairy, there's no technology fairy, so that was kind of like so I don't know what they're planning to do with that, if they're planning to do anything with Tekna at all. The specialist. Sky he could be a great character. He could be a great character in the future. He's not a prince, and he's an orphan now, so that's new. He has this weird love triangle with Stella and Bloom that takes up a big chunk of his arc, and I'm not really here for it. It felt very unnecessary. It's resolved by the end of the series, and it just did not feel like it needed to be there. It did not feel like it needed to be there. But he kind of grows a bit. He has his moments with Silva, the dude in charge of the specialist at Althea, which it's all one school now. It's not multiple schools. It's all one school. And there is no like cloud tower. There is, or whichever one the witch's school was, that doesn't exist anymore. Or at least if it does, we don't know about it. But so Althea is a school for fairies and for the specialist now. But anyway, so Sky has his moments with Silva, which are kind of impactful, and I'm kind of digging it. I feel like they could make Sky's character really interesting, so long as they, now that they've kind of gone past it, they stay away from the romance drama. Like, screw that. It's not worth it anymore. It's just kind of meh, especially in a show where, like, originally the pairs between the boys and the girls were very healthy for the most part, you know, minus Musa and Riven. Oh, I will get to Riven. I will get to him. Brandon doesn't exist at all, if he ever will. I'm sure he will at some point, because now Stella is single, but like Brandon didn't exist. He doesn't exist. I hope he will exist. Brandon's actually kind of a cool character in the original show. Timmy also does not exist. I don't know if he doesn't exist because Tekna doesn't, but like, yeah, Timmy's not around. I don't think Hilo was in season 1 of the original cartoon, so I don't know if they're gonna bring him in later as like a romance option for Tara, or if he's like already gonna be like with Flora the cousin, or I don't know what they're planning to do with that. I would love to see Tara have a romance, like a proper romance, rather than like, you know, having to be pushed aside as like, she's the fat friend who grows in confidence and doesn't have any like romantic options at all because she's focusing on herself. Like, no, fuck off with that shit. But I would love to see her have a romance option. So whatever the deal with Gila is, I hope that it turns out well. Riven is a grade A, most accurate character, grade A piece of shit in the show. He's terrible. He's absolutely terrible. He almost kind of makes cartoon Riven look like a better person. I despise Riven, so bravo on that. Bravo on that. That true to form. Dane was I thought he was going to be more important than he kind of actually was. He kind of quickly went from like a character that I was excited about to one I was like, oh, he's a shit. He's a piece of shit. I don't like want to cheer for him. I don't want to like see him that much. He's the worst. And that was kind of that. And then we have Beatrix, who, if I'm thinking correctly, should be like the replacement for the Trix witches. I see Stormy and Darcy. I think that Beatrix is the actual worst, in that anyone who could fall for her very poor manipulation is honestly like low-key kind of deserving of it. But I mean, she did her part. She played her villain part well. She dragged in Riven and she dragged in Dane somehow. Like, they actively really cared about her, and I was like, that's weird, but sure. Even though literally all she's done is bully and betray you two, sure. This is abusive. But yeah, so Beatrix exists. Then we have the teachers. So we have Dowling, who replaces Miss Farragonda. We have Silva, who's in charge of the specialist. And we have Harvey, who's like the Earth Fairy school teacher med guy. Oh, also, both of the schools are now like co-op. So, co-op. The fairies are boys and girls, and the specialists are boys and girls as well. They're not like only girls, only boys anymore. So it was a kind of a like, oh, should be a big thing, but like I didn't care. I was actually pretty fine with it. It was whatever. But so Dowling is much younger and not as wise as Miss Farragonda in the original show, but I still really liked her character. I really thought she played an interesting part in everything as someone who knows more but not enough to be this like deus ex machina kind of a info source like she kind of is sometimes in the cartoon, because sometimes in the cartoon it just felt like Miss Faragonda knew fucking everything. So I kind of appreciate that she does not know as much in this show, because it means that like she also has things that she needs to research, things that she needs to learn and be aware of. Silva is the specialist teacher. I don't, you know, he's got drama. Most of his stuff kind of revolves either around like the past that the teachers have, or specifically with Sky. He doesn't really interact with the fairies too much or any of like their specific stories. Him and Sky's dad were like friends at school together, so like they have a whole thing. And so like since Sky's dad is dead, Silva's kind of like the one who has raised Sky and has taken him under his wing and such, and kind of like trained him to be the, you know, try and be the best parts of his father. And so I think that's fairly interesting. I think he'll only get more interesting as the series goes. But for now, he's kind of just like a neat side character in my opinion. I weirdly, maybe this is just a me thing, I weirdly felt like there was some like, you know, some tension between him and Miss Dowling. But I could just be like totally stupid, but I think it's there, but it's whatever. That's neither here nor there. Harvey he's dad. He is dad. He's the father of Tara and Sam, and he was just a pretty nice guy. He just wants to protect his kids. He wants to take care of people. He wants to hang out with his plants. He was a very simple man. He was a very, very simple man, but I appreciated his character. Thankfully, they didn't have that creepy leprechaun teacher from the fucking series, the one who taught like the like transformation class, and he would like turn into things. It creeped me out as a kid. So thankfully he wasn't there. But those are kind of all of like the main cast of characters that we get throughout the show. And overall, like, they're pretty good for as like different as a lot of them were from their original selves. I honestly didn't have too much of a problem with them, besides being annoyed with just like how some of these season 1 characters are. I'm sure in future seasons they will change, you know, as they grow and they learn things, but like this is kind of how season 1 rubbed off on me with the characters this go around. Honestly, my favorites were probably Tara and Musa and Dowling. I thought Dowling's whole thing was quite interesting, but beyond that, Overall, I thought the series was pretty good. Well, the season was pretty good. Kind of once my nostalgia wore off during episode 2, I was able to really go in and watch the show for itself and not in comparison to the old cartoon. And I mean, it's nothing groundbreaking. It's nothing absolutely amazing or astonishing, but like I liked it. I got through the show, and I will probably sit through a second season if they make one. I hope they make one, actually, because I would like to see where they're going to take a lot of these things. Especially the last episode, you know, brought in a lot more questions and concerns than it answered, which is great for a season 1 finale. I will say though, Netflix, 6-hour-long episodes is not enough to tell a story. 8 at the absolute minimum, 12, maybe 15 at max. Some of the stuff felt so rushed because of that limited amount of time. I really hope that whatever season 2 brings, it is more episodes, if anything else. Because it felt ridiculous. It felt ridiculous. Overall, despite like the inaccuracies with the original cartoon, which I very much expected, and was for the most part pretty okay with, I kind of give the show my own rating. I'd probably say like a 7 out of 10, maybe a 6.5, but I'm gonna round up and I'm gonna say a 7 out of 10. It's definitely something like, I know I'm gonna be one of the few people that gives it a positive review. I know it. I know I am. But like overall, I kind of enjoyed it. I kind of liked it. It didn't disgust me the way that Riverdale and Chilling Adventures of Sabrina do. It was something that was like actually palatable and stuck at least true enough to the original content that I didn't feel like I was watching some ungodly otherworldly thing. So that was really nice. You know, they made a lot of, you know, decisions to make it more modern, to keep it hip with, you know, modern audiences, which I respect and I understand. They did what they could with only 6 hours of airtime, and that's also completely understandable. They wanted to make the story more interesting, and in all honesty, if you go back and you look at the original show, it is a trash can fire, especially when you get into the drama of the original English dubs and their premieres and such. Those of us who watched it on 4Kids, completely different show than what was originally shown in Italy, where the show first originally aired and is originally from. You know, Netflix tried to fix a lot with, you know, redoing and then like moving forward, but the show itself is a trash can fire of lore and mix-ups and changes. And so in all honesty, like, they have a lot more freedom than we give them credit for in what they do with this story. I think I was interested in going back and kind of learning about the history of the show and its different dubs after I'd watched the show and while I was kind of putting my thoughts together for this. And I went and watched videos by Unicorn of War, who I will link in the description below. Please go watch their videos talking about Winx and the different dubs and the history of the show. Absolutely, like, phenomenal videos. They're great. I watched them in bulk, and I thought that they were absolutely, you know, right on with the history, right on with the comparisons, and, you know, I didn't necessarily agree with all of their opinions, but I still thought it was really entertaining and highly suggest them, so link will be in the description to their channel down below. They have tons of videos on Winx and other shows. But kind of going back and looking at just how confuddled all of that was, it made it a lot easier for me to kind of forgive the mistakes or forgive the inaccuracies that the show made, because in all honesty, there's not really like one cohesive good version of the show that gives us solid, you know, solid lore, solid background. I believe the show is still technically running today, and it's nothing like what it was when we were kids. So for all of the inaccuracies, all of the good, all of the bad, all of the ugly, all of the pretty, I think overall the, you know, directors of Fate did the best they could with what they were given and what they could do. You know, the whitewashing was not cool. I don't approve of. I would love to know what the hell was going through the casting directors' heads when they made those decisions. I would love to know what was going through people's heads. But that aside, looking at this from strictly an entertainment point and a film point, I didn't hate it. 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10 from me. And I will stick by that. I will stick by that because I have taken off the nostalgia glasses for a show that I personally loved growing up. And I still really enjoyed this show, and I will be tuning in for season 2 should they hopefully get it. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Fate the Winx Saga on Netflix. I'd love to hear you guys' opinions and what you guys think of the show, what your thoughts and opinions were on it in the comments down below. And I'll talk to you guys later.